Good morning. Hello, hello. Right, I'm going to wait for people to join. So welcome. We've got a bit of blue sky today. Hope you're all okay. Right. I can see bodies joining. I can't see names yet. So welcome. Hi, I can see there's some eyes. I start to get little eyes on the screen that says there's people here, which is always a relief. I can't tell who you are yet, so good morning and welcome and thank you for joining. But I can see that you're coming in. So that's great. So we're going to start. So welcome. You are joining me today for a fairly short session, 20 minutes roughly, maybe slightly longer, depends how much I talk, on back care. So I want to give you a little bit of information around your backs because I feel like the way to care for our backs is to be empowered with a bit of knowledge around the role, the function, how they work, and I think that will help you. So just to be clear, if you are struggling with debilitating pain, recurring pain, chronic pain, pain that stops you doing what you want to do, so pain that stops you playing with your grandchildren or going to work or doing the exercise that you want to do, my first bit of advice around backs would be go to your GP. I caveat that with GPs aren't always the greatest. I don't want to slag off any GPs, but they're not always the best with back care. So if that doesn't get you anywhere, then invest in a physio appointment. So back pain really needs decent diagnosis. So that's not me. I would never diagnose. I can definitely work with a diagnosis. I can definitely work with a physio, do that all the time, but I don't diagnose and I wouldn't diagnose. So if you're not sure and your pain is severe, if it's keeping you awake, if it's stopping you from working, you must get medical professional help. So that's my first thing. But if your pain is lower backache, if your pain is hormonal changes around the pelvis, if you're getting sciatica, or if you are struggling with pain that is related to like a habitual movement, so if you're spending hours at your desk, if you're spending hours in a car, probably not these days, but when we start to get back to normal, that might be you. If it's kind of a habit pain, you know, like at the end of the day, you think, oh my God, my back. If you're a nurse and you're on your ward and by the end of the day you've been standing and you're done, then I'm definitely your person. I can absolutely help with that. So what we're going to run through today is a little bit about the function of the lower back, why we get these lower back pains, and a few things that we can do to help them. So first of all, let's talk about your back. So we're going to really focus down lower back pain, because that was what you asked for. But I want to talk about your spine itself. So if you imagine the top part of your back here is kind of supported by this big rib cage here. It's a big bony structure that goes round the body, obviously, but supports that back of that spine, that top bit of your spine, the thoracic spine. So the downside of that is that it can be quite tight and immobile and a bit stiff, but the upside is it's fairly stable and it's quite supported. Same in the lower body. You've got the pelvis at the bottom here, and again, it's a big bony structure. It can in itself be a little bit unstable, but it supports that lower part of your back, your spine, that really lower sort of coccyx area. And then you've got this middle section. Now the middle section is fairly free. It's your lumbar spine, so it goes between your pelvis and your ribs. It's responsible for a lot. So it needs to be able to flex. It needs to be able to extend, it needs to be able to laterally flex side to side, and it needs to be able to rotate. So there's quite a lot of movement in that area. And the upshot of that is that it is unsupported and sometimes unstable because of that. So it needs to be strong and mobile, so stable and mobile. It needs to be able to do all the things. So the downside of that is that most people have either stable, tight, or unstable, weak. So it needs to be both. So what we have to create that is our core. So we don't have a bony structure that supports the lower back, but we have our core muscles. Core muscles wrap around and they support from the bottom and the top. You've got your breathing muscle, your diaphragm, you've got your pelvic floor, and you've got your obliques, you've got your flexion muscles, your rectus, your six-pack across the top, and you've got your deep transverse abdominals that sit low and deep above the pelvic floor. So we've got the core, and the core muscles also need to be strong. They need to be flexible. They need to be able to be dynamic. They need to move with your moving body. They need to be able to support your change in direction, and they need to be able to do that quickly. So they need to be really dynamic, but at the same time, they need to hold you still. They need to maintain your stability. They need to be flexible, so they can move and shift and change. But ultimately, they need to be strong. But the problem is, a very, very strong, tight core that's on all the time and engaged all the time is just as dangerous for your spine, your lower back, as a weak core. So we need to be really sure that we're not just doing all the core strengthening stuff and getting really tight and strong and engaged, and we're not ever allowing those muscles to rest and relax and lengthen. Muscles need to lengthen and shorten and lengthen and shorten. They need to be dynamic, they need blood flow, they need the tonic, they need to be able to move. So there's nothing worse, there's nothing sadder than a pelvic floor that's constantly engaged and lifting you but can't release and let go, because we need it to be able to release for body functions and childbirth, etc., etc. So basically, that's a bit of information around about your spine. Like I said, I'm keeping it quick today and sort of top level, not going too deep. But what I want to get across to you is that it's very unusual to meet anybody who is 40 plus who hasn't got some kind of niggle, injury, niggle, pain maybe. It's very unusual, and I think the reason for that is that we're creatures of habit. We spend long periods of time in similar positions. We like doing what we like doing, and we don't really change that much. And I think what we need to be aware of as we age, and in an aging body, which we are all in, is that our job as caretakers of our bodies is to maintain them and maintain our strength, maintain our flexibility, maintain our mobility. And in my mind, the first step for that is awareness. So first of all, understanding a little bit around the anatomy of what we're trying to do, not too much, but just a bit of a basic overview. But also figuring out where you are in space, understanding what you're asking your body to do, just having a little bit of a sense of space, a sense of proprioception. Where am I in space? What is my body doing, and what do I need to assist me with that? So we're going to start with a little session. I'm going to show you a few different exercises that demonstrate a few of the different things that we need the spine to be able to do, or the lower back to be able to do. So starting off lying on your back, and we're going to talk, and if you do plants with me, you'll know this anyway, but we're going to talk about neutral. So lying on your back, your spine has natural curves, and we want to start off by maintaining those natural curves. So first of all, just think about your pelvis and your hips and your pubic bone, and just place your hands on top. So your palms will be on your hip bones, fingertips around about your pubic bone. And to find a neutral pelvis, you can just wriggle forwards and backwards. But your neutral pelvis is where your hands lay flat. So the fingertips shouldn't be higher than the palms, and equally they shouldn't be lower. And you can see how if they were higher, your lower back would be imprinting or sinking slightly into the ground. And if they were lower, your lower back would be arching. So my natural state is this. I really love a good arch in my back, but the problem with that is that my pubic bone would be lower than my hips. So if you're not sure, and you hear the term neutral quite a bit, and people often talk about the lower, make sure there's a gap in your lower back, and that is important, But more importantly is the positioning of the pelvis, because everyone's spinal curves are going to be different, but everyone's pelvis is basically the same. The bony structure is the same. So we want to get that flat position. And then you just want to make sure that the rest of your body is relaxed. And you will have a little arch in the lower back of some sort. Some people's backs are flatter than others. So then to get some stability around this position, because that can still feel quite unstable because you're resting on a one bony point on your tailbone. To get some stability, we've been talking recently in class about this 5% connection. So I'm going to take you into 100% first. So you're going to just lower your lower back, or squeeze or scoop your lower back down into the floor. And you'd feel how everything's pressing into the ground, your belly's pulling down, your pubic bone is now higher than your hip bones, but you'll feel how that is 100%. So you're all the way flat to the floor. And then if you went back to neutral, that is 0%. So you're on your tailbone, you've got your arch back, you're flat through your pelvis. If we wanted 5%, it wouldn't be a visual change. There's no shift, there's no pulling off of the tailbone, but there's a shift in your engagement, there's a shift in your awareness. So you take a big breath in to start, and on your exhale, I want you to soften your ribs down. Feel like you tighten your belt, you're squeezing yourself into a tight pair of jeans, and you might very slightly tip your pelvis. So your hip bones, ever so slightly, just 5%, pull towards your ribs. Now, visually to me, there would be no change. I wouldn't be able to see a difference. But internally to you, you should be able to feel a huge difference. And the difference is that you should be able to feel your pelvic floor awareness through the back passage and the front passage. A little bit of a tightening across the front of the pelvis here, and that's your transverse abdominals. You should be able to feel your waist cinching, like you're squeezing yourself into that, doing up the buckle of that tight pair of jeans, so Boxing Day jeans. The ribs are soft, and as a consequence, hopefully, because there's so much awareness through here, your shoulders should be fairly relaxed. Now, then if we were to take this into a bridge, and this is a stability exercise that you can work on at home. So your bridging would be holding that awareness, pressing the floor away and lifting the bottom. And you'd come up maybe 3/4 of the way. And then as you go back down, once you're at the top here, you still want that awareness, and then you take the hips all the way back down again. Now, the reason why the 5% is so useful here is because when we change direction and we move the body, if you don't have that connection, you get to here, and if you are strong in your lower back but weak in your tummy, you're going to be using your lower back to lift you up. You'll also probably use your bottom and everything but your core. So your 5% is there for this, in this purpose, for stability. So we're finding our core through 5% to create stability in the spine. And stability is the first thing we're practicing. So this is our stable section. So we're going to bridge up and down to about 3/4 of the way and straight back down again, holding that stable spine. So the emphasis really is, don't care how high you lift, care how good the lift is. Care how stable you are. Care how much connection you can still feel in your pelvic floor as you lift. Care how tight your jeans are, how you've managed to maintain that buckle, that button done up. Care that your ribs aren't leading the way and flaring out. Mine would love to. So if you're like me with a kind of bendy lower back, that may happen for you too. Care that you lift by pushing the floor away. Lift with the feet, lift with the legs, don't lift with the lower back. Okay, so this is the first exercise I want you to practice. You're going to maintain that 5% and you're going to do your stable pelvic bridges. So then I want you to come onto all fours, and we're still in our stability section. And on hands and knees, it's harder to know when you're in your neutral because you don't have the tactile feedback of the floor. So a mirror is useful, but so is 5%. So you start by just dropping your tummy, letting it go, completely relaxing. And then on your exhale, you draw your belly up and you find that same feeling of 5% connection that you had a moment ago. So your ribs are soft, your belly is pulling up, your waist is tight, You're cinched into that corset. Your pelvic floor is active, which is hard in a position like this because your pelvis is open, but you've got awareness because you've got your 5%. And now you're going to hold that position and you're going to let your bottom travel back to your heels and you're not going to lose your 5%. So as you travel, your focus isn't on where you are and how far you're moving. Your focus is on holding those connections in your core. The beauty of this is that you become so aware and stable and strong in your centre that suddenly the weight in your shoulders isn't a problem anymore. The neck isn't a problem anymore. Everything else can relax because your core is doing the job for them. If your tummy wasn't strong here and your core wasn't switched on, your shoulders would do a lot. Your shoulders would be up around your ears probably. That's a conversation for another day. But generally speaking, if you have sore shoulders or shoulders that overact, do too much, and you're constantly rubbing the back of your neck, you need to work on your core and you need to work on your lower back. So these are all exercises, this first section, around stabilising. So we're going to come on to mobilising and strengthening. So we're going forwards and backwards, and I want you to keep these small, but I just want you to practice the holding of that 5%. What a lot of you will find is you'll get to about here, get a few inches back, and you won't be able to hold it anymore. Your pelvis needs to broaden, and most of you will prefer to tuck, and you'll end up a bit like this. Okay, so if your eye line drops, that's a first sign that you've gone too far. But keep it within a range that you can really control. So it needs to be quite small, but it needs to be strong and aware, okay? So that's your second stabilising exercise. Your third one is side lying, because I want to take you into a few different positions. So you're going to come down to side lying and you're going to have your top leg straight. Sorry, I know we're on Facebook, so it's portrait, which is a bit annoying. Never mind. So on side lying like this, same thing can happen. Everything drops. Suddenly we get into fetal position and we're like, we're relaxing, we're side lying. We're not. We want to think ribs in, tummy on, very slight tuck of the tail just to find those connections, and a little tuck often helps, but not a visual tuck. You're not rounding. You're going to keep it quite neutral, and you're going to have this little lift in the underside of the waist. You may not get your hands underneath, that's fine, but you want to feel like you're drawing away from the floor, like you're trying to pull your centre away from the ground. You're not dropping, you're not collapsing, and that you're going to hold. This top leg's going to lift, and all you're going to do is kick it forwards and take it backwards. Now, the tighter you are in your hamstrings and your glutes, the harder it's going to be to maintain your positioning. So keep this quite small if you need to. And again, remember, the moving leg is a distraction. This is the bit you're thinking about. All we're doing is challenging the shape of the body to try and make sure that the core can remain connected or the spine can remain stable. So we travel forwards and backwards for our stability exercises, keeping that pelvis absolutely still, keeping the lift in the waist, keeping that 5% connection, and just remembering to breathe. And every exhale can take you back into your connection. You can find it again. So you'll find in this one that tight muscles in the body impact directly on your positioning of your spine. So it's not enough to just think of back care as back care. You've got to think of the whole body. Where you bear tightness, for example, here, if I bear tightness in my hamstrings, as I move my leg forwards, which I do every time I take a step, if they're tight, that's going to impact immediately on the movement and positioning of my spine. I'm not going to be able to hold that stability. So your tightness in your legs and elsewhere, but we're going to think about legs for now, directly impacts how stable your spine can be. An unstable spine equals wear and tear, equals pain. So you've got to look at the whole body, not just the back, is what I mean. Relax there. You would do the other side. We're not going to do that now. I want you to come up because now we're going to talk about mobility. So lying on your back, I said already that the spine needs not just stability, it needs mobility and strength too. So we're going to go for mobility now. And like I just said, length of muscles and muscle tightness impacts really directly on the stability that you're going to have in your lower back. So one of the big ones that I find gets quite a quick win is hamstrings, so backs of your thighs here. If you are desk-based and you're in this bent knee position all the time, this muscle is going to be tight because it pulls round the back of the knee, also the pelvis, but it's this bit that's going to restrict you. So taking your hands around the back of the thigh and just hold on there, making sure here that you are neutral in your spine or in your pelvis. So your tail is on the ground, and again, your pubic bone and hip bones are level. And then you're going to hold onto the back of that leg. There's a million ways to stretch your hamstrings. This, I think, is one of the better ways, or you could use a band, but it's one of the better ways for someone with a back injury. And you're going to take that leg up. Now, it may get to about here and you feel the pull, and that's far enough, in which case you hold it and then you back away. Okay? The most important thing is that as you get into this straighter leg position, that you don't let the stretching leg impact on your spinal position. I see this a lot, that people are so desperate for a straight leg that they sink into their lower back. And the problem with that is you miss out this whole section of hamstring, which is here, which is pulling, because it's tight, it's pulling on your lower back. So it's immediately you're kind of missing the point of the hamstring stretch. So tail always down, even if it means you don't get a straight leg. Straight leg is vanity. We want the neutral pelvis. The other thing here is that you want to make sure this waist on both sides is long, because again, if it isn't, you're up into lateral flexion, which means you're not stretching the hamstring efficiently. So you've got to think of your positioning for your stretch. So you would do this on both sides, like I say, a couple of times a week, maybe 10. Just think of this as maintenance, and it's just getting that length. You could hold it, you could get a band or a dressing gown cord and hold it here and breathe and take some deep breaths and try and get that leg a bit closer. That would be all stuff you could build on. And then you're going to come back onto your hands and knees. And again, mobilizing the spine is important. So the hamstring stretch is about mobilizing the surrounding muscle areas. You would also need to do glute stretches, hip flexor stretches. Any muscle that attaches to the pelvis, you want to be stretching. But equally, we want to actually mobilize the spine itself, which a lot of you will have done this exercise with me a million times. It's cat stretch. It's brilliant for that. So we start, as we did before, by relaxing the tummy. And then on your exhale, you're going to draw your belly button up, find that 5% and hold here. So this is your start position. Shoulders are nice and relaxed because the tummy is on, the core is active. And then you're going to lift your belly button up to your spine. You're going to feel like you send your tail underneath you and you're rounding into your spine. Your head and neck will drop as a consequence and you're in your cat. And release back. Now the thing I see most of all when people have tight lower backs is that they go into their cat like this. They take it all up into the upper back and the tummy's off, it's not doing anything. And we want to lead our mobilization with our core muscles. So we have to lift the belly and use the core to create mobility, because we're teaching the body that when we mobilize, when we move the spine, we need the core to do it for us. We don't want the spine to move as a consequence of other movements in the body. We want to choose it. We want the muscles to be in charge, protecting, supporting, and stabilizing all the time. So those core muscles just start to learn to switch back on. The big problem with the core is that most people's is switched off, particularly if you're sitting a lot. In fact, if you're doing any one thing a lot, if you're on your feet all day long, if you're sitting all day long, the core can get really lazy. So this is just about mobilizing and using those muscles, choosing to use the core to create the mobility. So again, don't think of how much you move, don't think of how big the rounding is, think of where it's coming from, what muscles you're switching on, and making sure that when you come back to a flat back, you're not collapsing, you're not letting go, you're finishing at your 5% strong connection. Let's just do one more, and then we're going to move on because I'm just aware of your time. Saturday morning, release back and relax there. Okay, final thing for mobility is your pelvic curl. So coming back onto your back. Again, if you do Pilates with me, you'll do these. So feet on the ground, hip distance, arms by your sides. Now, again, we're going to start with our 5%, so find those connections, And then we're going to draw the belly button down to the ground into that tilt that we did earlier. So we imprint fully to the ground. Make sure that that imprint is because the tummy is moving it. So the tummy is tightening, these muscles across the front are shortening, and that pulls the hips towards the ribs. Lower back is long, tail is under, and then we curl up, lifting the tail, mobilizing. Now, the aim for these is always mobility between the vertebrae. So you want to think that every vertebra of the spine, you can come back down, is moving independently of each other. So they're bearing equal and even load. When our backs get tight, they tend to join forces. And we want the muscles between each vertebra to really be independent. So we tuck first, and then as you lift, you can always imagine that your spine is like a string of pearls. So your tail comes up first, then the next vertebra, then the next. All the time you've got to keep the tummy on so that you can massage into that spine to create the singular movements. Come up again about 3/4 of the way, too far and people end up here. So don't come all the way up, just think 3/4 and then come back down. You want to come to about shoulder blades and then curl back down. Now there's lots of different ways you can do a pelvic curl or spine curl. For the essence of a back care focus, this is what you want to think of, is just mobilizing and isolating. Okay, so again, a few of those with intention a few times a week. Finally, strengthening. Now, the strengthening of the lower back is strengthening of core, but it's also strengthening of surrounding areas, because the stronger the surrounding areas are, the less the lower back has to do, the less work it has to do. So for the first thing I would, hang on a minute, what have I written here? Surrounding, yes, so exactly, it reduces the role of the lower back by strengthening the surrounding areas, which reduces the wear and tear of on the lower back, on the lumbar spine. So first thing I would always suggest, which a lot of people have, which is quite lazy, is glutes. So glute work, glute strengthening is really important for the lower back, and the best way to do that is with a squat. So I think we all know squats, but I'm just going to very, very quickly show you one or two. So I'd like you to have your feet just wider than hip width and very slightly turned out. Roll your shoulders back, and again, just a little connection. Not a tuck, you're not pulling under, but just enough so that you can feel your abdominals tighten, you can feel your ribs softening, your shoulders are therefore relaxed and open. Hands in front, and you're just going to bend at the pelvis and at the knees and squat back. Now, I don't want this to be a big movement. You can hold on to something if you need to, but I do want you to be clear that your knees aren't coming forwards. This is the biggest mistake I see in a squat is this. You should always be able to wiggle your toes. You should always have weight in your heels. And it's an inhale down. Keep the connections in your tummy so your spine is long, bottom broadens, and then squeeze the heels to press up, squeezing the bottom at the top. Okay, so a few of those fairly regularly to really strengthen the glutes is going to take, again, wear and tear out of the lower back. Glutes are notoriously lazy. Lots of people have lazy glutes. Even if they're strong, they can be lazy. So really work on using them in some of these exercises we've done this morning, just to make sure that they fire up in different positions and in different ways. We need to make sure that we're aware of the core and the lower back and the surrounding muscles in all sorts of different places and positions. Okay, it's a lot to do. There's a lot to do. And then core, obviously we need to strengthen core. So as you know, your core muscles are not just these. People do these all day long and think they're doing core work. You are, but you're doing one bit. So it's important that we do all of it. You need to do lateral flexion, you need to do rotation, but we need to do stability too. So I'm going to show you a stability exercise now. So ribs soften down, tail is on the ground, find your 5% strong belly. Now you can bring one leg up to tabletop, join it with your second leg, holding that 5%. First leg down, second leg down. That would be option 1, up, up, down, down. Option 2 is up, up and hold. And then you toe tap. Exhale and draw back. Exhale, inhale back. If your lower back plays up at all, Bring your knees a bit closer, but don't sink into the floor. Keep your 5%, just take the weight out of it by bringing the legs in. And then you can do the same thing. You don't have to go all the way down. You take the legs as big and as far as you can, but your priority is this, holding your 5%. Bring your arms up. Your option 3 is dead bug, so you would go opposite arm, opposite leg. Now, a few of these fairly regularly just take you back to your basics. Think stability, think inner strength, think 5%, use your breath, relax the rest of the body and keep the tension here. And that's going to work, excuse me, that's going to work some of your deeper stabilizers, okay? So there's a whole load of core work you can do. As you know, I run a core challenge, so that's always a good bet. But yes, working the core in lots of different directions is really key. Finally, I'm going to show you a back extension, and this is your final thing. Now, back extension, again, we need to be able to extend the spine, so it's really important movement, but we don't want the lower back to always be doing that. The problem is if you, for example, I use the example of desk-based because it's really, really common, but if you're a desk-based worker, your shoulders are going to be forwards, your back is going to be round, so getting this kind of movement is really hard, and most people tend to go straight for the lower back and lift like this. So I'd like you to find your tip of your nose, take your legs slightly wider than you are, squeeze your bottom, and just find your 5%. Draw that tail slightly away, pubic bone slightly under, feel the belly engage, feel the ribs soften. Now you're going to hold that, or you're going to try and hold it, as you breathe in. Now draw your collarbones nice and broad, pull the armpits to the waist, anchor your elbows, and just start to breathe into the front of your ribs. Now as you lift up like this, your aim is to hold your 5%. You won't go far holding 5% and then release down. Now the movement is an extension, but it's really, the focus is on lengthening. I want you to think like you breathe into the front of your chest, and it's like you're trying to slide your rib cage forwards. Your aim at the top here is just to hold. Think of broadening your collarbones. Don't look forwards. If you're looking forwards, you've lifted using your neck. Look down. You want to be eye line roughly in line with your fingertips. It's not a big lift. Armpits and shoulder blades should be pulling back, and your 5% should be on, and then release down. So it's really important that it's not just a lift. It's got to be an opening, a slide. Focus on the breathing in, inflating a balloon at the front of your chest, opening your ribs to the front of the mat. And there's, as I said, a million different back extension variations you can do, but this is a good starting point to make sure that you've got your connections in your 5%, in your belly, and you don't let go of your core as you do your extension work. Okay, and relax there. So in summary, to summarise all of that, all of the last 33 minutes, which is meant to be 20, sorry, you cannot look at lower back only for back care. You've got to treat the whole body. You've got to reintroduce better movement patterns into everything you do to take away the role of the lower back, so that you are thinking more about how everything else you do is impacting and wearing and tearing on the lower back, rather than just thinking, I need to strengthen my lower back. That's not the answer. You need to strengthen your core, yes, but again, we know we need to mobilise it too. We need to flex it, we need to extend it, we need to stabilise it, we need to strengthen it, but we need all of those things to be happening, and that applies to the whole body. There's no point in having strong biceps if they can only work in this position. They have to work here too. They have to be able to bring you up. So every muscle in the body needs to be able to lengthen and shorten and change direction and have blood flow. And so we need to be looking at the whole body, not just the lower back. So I really hope that helps. Like I say, it's kind of your responsibility as your caretaker of your body to be thinking about looking after it. And it's really annoying because you're always going to have that one friend that doesn't have to do it. But it doesn't matter if it's your body, and reducing the pain in your body it can only be done by you, and it is a process and it is a commitment. But consistency, making small changes, thinking, awareness, changing your awareness, improving your awareness will make huge differences to actually the role, how well your body functions as a unit. So I hope that was helpful. Any questions, please do let me know. I didn't get many before, just a couple. Thanks for joining, guys. I can just see you're on here now. Nice to see you all. Any questions afterwards, let me know. I'll be posting this into the group and I can answer questions below. So do let me know. And I will see you again soon. Thanks, everybody. Take care. Have a lovely, lovely Saturday. See you soon.